Well, the president's off to a strong start in Mexico, but of course, he's only been in office for a very short period of time. He's put people in his cabinet who are strong voices for economic orthodoxy, sound management of the economy, proven managers on the economy, and also in terms of foreign policy. So he's off to a good start. He's got a big vision, and I think the issue is really going to be one of expectations in 2013. President Peña Nieto came into office promising fundamental reforms in things like the energy sector, the education sector, Social Security. These are issues that have a long history in Mexico and that are very politically sensitive. And by trying to do all of those at the same time, or at least in a short time period, he's really setting himself up to handle several of Mexico's sacred cows at once. It's going to be very difficult, and he's got a lot in front of him.
The top 5 banks in Mexico accounts for 75% of nearly all of the business, so it's very top-heavy. What does the World Bank mean, and what does Mexico mean when they talk about the restructuring and financial reforms when it comes to Mexican banks and financial institutions?
Yeah, Mexico's on the map in a favorable way. It used to be that when you talked about the Mexican economy or the Mexican banks, you talked about them in the context of collapse, catastrophe, crisis. Now you talk about them in the sense of positive examples for other economies in the G20. Certainly, the IMF has recently looked at Mexican banks and pronounced the sector to be strong. They are overly consolidated, you're right. There are a small number of banks that have a large percentage of the Mexican banking economy, but nonetheless, the banks themselves are strong, and that's for several reasons, not the least of which is the reforms that Mexico took from the last crisis to really reform its banking sector, improve transparency, improve regulatory oversight, that sort of thing. But also Mexico's economy has been growing, and when the economy grows, people are moving into the middle class, consumers are growing, the loan portfolios are not just increasing, but they're also strengthening. In other words, credit worthiness is improving in Mexico and other things like that.
G20 agenda, one of the big ones is strengthening the financial system.
Yes.
What's one or two things that the Mexican president, the new Mexican president now, could focus on in 2013 and possibly even going out several years? How would he focus on that?
Well, most broadly, he has to continue the growth of the Mexican economy. The Mexican economy's been doing well compared to Brazil, compared to other Latin American countries. Mexico is actually going to do better. Everybody hears about Brazil. Mexico's been the star over this year. But he has to continue that growth, and much of that depends, frankly, on the United States, because over 80% of Mexico's exports, even today, go to the United States. So that interlinkage is very, very important.
What's the greatest risk to the Mexican economy and to the financial institutions there for 2013? Well,
Mexico's not immune to the global economy, and I've mentioned the United States in terms of the dependence there, but Mexico is also depending for a lot of its investment, actually ironically, from China, because some of the investment that had gone to China is now coming back to Mexico. If, for whatever reason, China recovers in the way that it was, perhaps some of that investment does not come to Mexico the way they were anticipating. I think that's a risk. I think there are also risks in terms of the ability of Mexico's education system to continue to produce people for the jobs that are available in the global economy. I think that's very important. I mean, the people that come to the United States from Mexico in the labor force tend to be the unskilled, the workers looking for jobs that aren't necessarily the high-end jobs of the economy. That needs to change. Mexico needs to find ways to educate those folks, keep them at home, because really your people are your strongest asset in any economy, and the Mexican leaders will tell you as much. And I think that's a risk too. So the continued flow of people to the United States, although it's been much reduced in recent years, no doubt, but they have to find ways to keep that talent at home and build on that, innovate with it, and establish stronger economic growth through that means.
Eric Farnsworth talking Mexico with CCTV's Philip Yin.